Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the US Law Live podcast. My name is Nick Roush, one of the hosts for today, and I'm joined by my other host, co-host, Mr. Mike Judy. Mike, how you doing?
I am good, Nick. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. I'm looking out my window right now, and we've got snow coming in up here in the Twin Cities, which I know, Mike, I don't know, do you have anything coming your way? I mean, we're the week of Thanksgiving's when we're recording this, so I don't know. Got
It's
anything?
it's coming Saturday morning into Sunday. It's supposed to start with rain on Saturday and then turn to snow and be here on Sunday. But knowing Kansas City, Missouri weather, that means it'll be 65 and sunny by Monday or shortly thereafter. No, I thought you were going to tell me that you were looking out your windows to look at all the Vikings fans just lamenting your loss to the Packers.
As a lifelong Chicago Bears fan, it is fun. It is fun to watch football recently. And to my wife, who listens to these podcasts, who is a longtime Minnesota Vikings fan, it is also double fun to watch football on Sundays this fall. So it's been good. But Mike, I mean, big win. The Chiefs, big win against Indianapolis.
They pulled it out. I was really nervous for a while, but this Chiefs season has been unlike any of the past 5, 6, 7 years. So it has been a roller coaster of emotions for me. And trying to teach my kids that, look, the Chiefs aren't going to be good every year. It's okay for them to struggle. Um, but yeah, but
Well, we'll
we,
get Roger Yaffe to greenlight a US Law NFL podcast because that could probably consume the entire 30 minutes we had today.
a
But
thousand percent.
our guest for this week is none other than Trey Sandoval from Mahaffey Weber in San Antonio, Texas. Trey, how are you?
I'm good. And man, appreciate you guys inviting me on and looking forward to having our chat with you. And just not that it matters clarification wise, I'm based in the Houston office, but we have our San Antonio office, Nick, just FYI.
He
And
just didn't want to acknowledge that the Houston Texans may or may not be relevant again.
that
See, I felt like that's where it was going on the football. And I also was going to tell you boys that, Nick's looking outside and you're looking outside. I'm looking outside at 79 degrees, turning into 75 tomorrow. That's what's
must
going
be
on here in
nice.
Houston.
Must be
I
nice,
know.
Trey.
Yeah, but how's your traffic?
Horrid, horrid. And again, we're talking about the 2 weeks during the year that we have good weather here in Houston. So that's a
Right.
caveat.
Uh,
Absolutely. Well, Trey, before we get started, one of the recent U.S. law updates that went out is your work in the transportation group within U.S. law and becoming the vice chair. So congratulations on that promotion.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege, and I look at it as an honor to be able to participate. I think our network and our attorneys are some of the best transportation attorneys in the country. So I feel very fortunate. Thank you.
yeah, no, it's nobody is more deserving than you are. You are certainly no stranger at U.S. law events, not just transportation, but any of the member conferences, client conferences. You are certainly not a stranger to anybody. But I guess give us kind of your rise through U.S. law. How'd you get involved? What took you where you are now?
So that's an interesting story. So as you guys know, we always do. The network always does events at DRI, TIDAS, different conferences across the country. I've told Roger this, so this is not a confession that is coming out, but I may even have told Cheryl this at one point. But I used to crash U.S. law events often because I would have some of my clients would be in there, and I'd have some friends in there, and I'd have some vendors in there, and all of a sudden somebody would say, "Hey, we're going to this bar on top of this rooftop in Chicago," and it's a U.S. law thing. I know you're not a part, but if you want to kind of join me, then fine. And of course, you guys know me, man. I don't meet a stranger. I
Right.
kind of fit within. So my first foray into U.S. law was crashing probably two or three happy hour events at different moments. And again, I recognized from the very beginning the value of U.S. law and saw again the people that were on the boards with me in different organizations. They were members from across the country, and again, I just saw the value in that. So I'll never forget. I was sitting in Midtown Houston with a good friend of mine, Drew Edwards, who used to be with U.S. Legal and is with Remkus now. And U.S. Legal was a partner for a period of time for U.S. Law. And he said, "Hey, Trey, you're not gonna believe this, but the former member firm of Houston has stepped out and it's open. And so the moment I heard that, I wrote a memo to my law firm. I talked about the values, and making a long story medium short, it went through several iterations. I had to talk some of my partners into it, but ultimately got involved. We were vetted for that 6, 7, 8 months, and I think we joined in end of 2018, first of 2019, if I remember.
And I know you, and you and I've chatted about this offline, but certainly you are one of the most active members in the network. And what I've always found in our conversations is that, you come to the table, with your clients and making recommendations to folks all over the country, and how, whether it's in Kansas City and the work that, you and I've collaborated on, or other parts of the country, that's a big, arrow in your quiver as well for your clients, is helping them get connected all over the country. And I'm assuming that that's something that's helped your practice just explode.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, the network. So just to kind of put it in context, so I've been involved in the state level as far as our association for a long period of time, and I just moved to the executive board on there, and probably about 3 or 4 years will become president of our defense association.
Oh,
I
nice.
recognized through the 15, 16 years I spent moving up in the board and doing the different committees, how important a network within the state of Texas is. So anytime if I don't have an office someplace, or I need a reference to somebody in a local area, or I need to know something about a judge, there is about 7 people in every city in Texas that I can call, that I consider friends, that I've hung out with and that I've been to a conference with. That model is essentially what we did with USLAW. And as you both know, because you and I, Mike, you and I have worked, Nick, you and I have worked together on cases before. That model of being nationwide was just taken to the next level when we joined USLAW. And I had several clients where I was national counsel for, which I was sending 5, 6 cases to the network on a monthly basis for a period of time before some of the business ops were sold off, and some changes took place with that client. So in addition to that, I have some clients that hire us for Texas, and they say, hey, do you know anybody in X state? And I said, absolutely, man. I have a great attorney in Minneapolis, or I have a great attorney in Kansas City that we need to connect you up with. And then sometimes they say, hey, just stay on. You kind of act as the national counsel for this, or just direct them, kind of have them do the same protocols you do, and let you just kind of run that. And that's developed for about 2 or 3 other clients. And I probably have 5 or 6 of our network attorneys in the network working on transportation files, just because of the relationship I have with the client in Texas. So that in and of itself is why this network works, is because everybody's been vetted. They're absolutely quality lawyers. And I don't think I've ever sent a case to any lawyer in the network that I was disappointed in the quality of the work product.
It's been a good relationship, and it helps, I think, having that network. A recent story, Connor from your team, Trey, had a matter in North Dakota, and we actually saw each other at the products forum when we were down in Charleston, and it was just kind of funny. We met each other there, and then like the day after we all got back to our respective offices, he called and he's like, oh my gosh, I completely forgot I had this new matter kind of coming up, and we don't have nobody to help us up in North Dakota for this client. And so some of those relationships just pay dividends, not just in your own networks, I think regionally, but across the country too. And it's just been so great to see you extend, I think, that work to others across the country, because it absolutely does make you a better resource for your clients, right?
Yeah, and Connor came into my office after he got back, told me about you, said, hey, I got this case, sent it over to him. I said, perfect, that's working. Because ultimately, as you kind of both know, and I know, Nick, you may not have been around because you're one of the original members to USLAW. Mm-hmm. And I can't recall, Mike, how long your firm's been with it. But the situation with us, because we are not the newest anymore. I mean, 2018 has been what? That's 7 years ago. It feels like yesterday in some ways. But
right.
building those relationships, it starts with a smaller group of people within my firm, and now we're slowly progressing out, and I'm getting more and more people involved in the network. That was Connor's first US Law. I've sent Jessica Winfon. I've sent different people to different events for different reasons. And quite honestly, in 2026, I've already marked different people from my team that's going to be participating in the transportation side of some of our events. So yeah, it's definitely a growth process.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's no shortage of lawyers reaching out to you, because I hear it from clients all the time about what's going on in Texas. What's up with these verdicts? What's up with the numbers out there, or down there, I should say. I mean, what is wrong with Texas? And you've got boots on the ground. I mean, number one, kind of what have you been seeing throughout your career on the rise in verdicts, particularly in the transportation arena? And then two, I know we've chatted offline about kind of some things you're doing to help combat that and really, dive into what's going on. So what is going on in Texas?
Wow, that's a loaded question on so many different levels.
It's complicated.
Legal wise, what's going on in
It's
Texas
complicated.
legal wise?
So, I think what makes Texas unique is a convergence of about three factors. Number one is that we are a very business-oriented, minded state. And again, the conservative aspect of that has given alternatives without really talking about politics in any form or fashion. Texas is being a conservative venue for companies that used to be in New York or California primarily, and we've made this huge transition over to Texas, and Austin has become basically the Midwest Silicon Valley. And so with this mindset of Texas being business oriented, it's created aspects within the judicial system that has made it easier for really twofold for plaintiffs to file lawsuits, because it's a notice state. We have there's no caps on non-economics like some of our other friends have in their states. And the fact that we're business minded, they want to have as many businesses come into Texas, creates defendants in cases, obviously. And then you have the other side of that where there's no caps. It's very easy jurisdiction for plaintiffs to file in. And then on top of that, because we elect our judges, you have a plaintiff bar that is extremely active in the political arenas that are creating even more plaintiff-oriented courts. You put all that together, and that creates a scenario where no one who does a good job in Texas will ever hurt for work. And I stood up on the stage at TIDA and said this. In fact, I complimented about 7 or 8 lawyers in Houston who I think are all outstanding lawyers, and I literally called them out by names. I said, there is plenty of work for all of us, and the fact that there are outstanding lawyers other than just those of us that do this work, and again, to whatever you consider the level of my work, there are people out there that do these things and they do them well. And so as far as what's going on in Texas, I think we have a very plaintiff-oriented environment, which will always create a ton of cases. 2, I think that the plaintiffs bar is so active and invest so much money to keep it that way that we will always have these verdicts. We will always have these larger, well-known cases across. And then quite honestly, and we don't have to talk about this on the podcast, but people who are certainly familiar with Texas and transportation, the Werner case, that could have dramatically changed the entire complexion of Texas. That was overturned by the Supreme Court a few months ago. And quite honestly, there was no part of me. I would have bet my life savings that the Supreme Court was going to overturn the Court of Appeals decision and make it so that trucking companies still wanted to come into Texas, because I had multiple clients that essentially said, I'm going to go to the border in Louisiana. We're going to go up to Oklahoma. We're going to go across Oklahoma through Colorado down to New Mexico, get back on I-10 and get over to California. I-10 in Texas would have become non-existent if the Werner case would have gone a different way.
Well, and one of the things that you mentioned there that it certainly struck a chord with me is, being up at TIDA and calling out folks that, may be quote unquote competitors that, are competing for the same business. But I think the mentality that you have there is one that is beneficial to everybody on the defense side. That, I mean, yeah, plaintiffs, they compete for cases, they want to get the cases, but once they're in the door, it's everybody wants to work together to drive up that settlement, drive up that verdict, because a rising tide lifts all boats. And it is refreshing to hear somebody on the defense side saying, yeah, absolutely, I would have liked to have had whatever case it was you're working on, but once you get it, once you've got it, like, I want to do everything within my power to help you combat this case, to bring that verdict down, to bring the settlement down, because in the end run, it's good for us, it's good for our clients. So kudos to you.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, that's a mentality. Uh, and you guys may feel differently. I mean, there's generational aspects. I know my partners and my senior partners, and I know, and not just my partners in Mahaffey Weber, but Texas. There was very much a mentality when I was a young associate that this is my book. You don't talk to my people. You don't do those things. You don't email them. Everything comes through me. I'm a conduit. And quite honestly, I think that's indicative of maybe a little bit of insecurity. And I'm not talking about anybody specific, but just as a mindset, there's a little bit of insecurity in there that kind of exudes when you're worried about someone else talking to your clients.
Yeah.
I had a mentor in my law firm who put me in front of clients from being a first year, second year associate. She was taking me to conferences. She was taking me to marketing. I learned to do the things that I'm doing from her. And I have perpetuated that. And like I said, there's no qualms. And quite honestly, there's so much work out there. And
Right.
Nobody's ever going to struggle, I think. And if somebody thinks somebody can do it better than I can, I want their work. I've said no to a lot of different situations for different reasons. So I really care about the clients. I've built personal relationships with most, if not all of them. And again, I like the fact that, hey, look, someone calls me and say, right now we are at complete capacity. Our bandwidth is fully taken up, but you've got these guys that I can refer out to, and here's an outstanding lawyer here. I know you still use them. I will let you. And then normally, and I'll be honest, gentlemen, every time I've ever said that, which has been probably maybe less than 10 times to clients, they are shocked that I would ever say that, and it has improved the relationship with them rather than taking it away. And I never lost any cases, because quite honestly, they would go maybe a month and they would say, hey, are you ready for another one? Are you ready for this?
Right.
So again, it's a mentality that you have, and I'm trying to instill that into my team and my younger associates and the younger partners that work on this, is that we're not fighting to keep these cases. We're fighting to do the best job that we can, and that will take care of the rest of it.
I think it's important, and I was actually talking to Chris Cotter at Rates Landris about this, and we had a case where it's a trucking case. We were getting ready for trial, and there was a few experts that I had never seen before, and sent out a request to the USLAW page. Chris had seen them before and gave me a call, and we were talking about transcripts and things that he had used. But what we were looking for, and the discussion we had is, whether it's taking cases to trial like that, or it's achieving a settlement in the reasonable range, or it's taking a case that had adverse liability facts and recorrecting course, we're all invested in creating additional data points, right? The verdicts are out there and create data points for whatever jurisdiction you're in, whether it's high, low, medium, whatever. But being able to have a network of folks around you who can assist you with not just being a data point of a bad verdict and creating your own point within itself to recorrect that course, it's just another benefit of the network. The question I have for you, Trey, that I want to get your thoughts on. So I'm in Minnesota, and we have no caps whatsoever. And I doubt we will get one from our legislature, at least while I'm practicing. And I'm curious, being in Texas and in that region of the country, are there things you see that could come forth from the legislature to get any support from that? Do you think it's kind of a stretch? I mean, what do you think?
So, okay. I have been dealing with this question that you're asking, Nick, for probably about going on 8 years with my involvement through the Texas Association Defense Council. I was the chair for our legislative committee for a couple of years, and then was an active participant in the things that were oriented for defense counsel. So we, as an organization in the state, are very active along with a couple of other organizations, and have kind of been a point person on that. I'm very much an advocate of getting involved in that capacity, and even this past year testified on behalf of SB 30, which was the verdict, the nuclear verdict proposal. But I'll tell you this, is that the plaintiffs bar obviously was extremely against that, and there was a lot of things that are going on. And as we talked about even at the outset of the podcast, the reason why Texas is such a litigation rich state is because of how active the plaintiffs are and how much they invest in that. So when you're talking about dealing with these runaway verdicts and the significance of why there's states these without caps, we absolutely have to deal with that through the legislature, because the courts are not going to do that. And especially when they're so plaintiff oriented throughout the state. And so we are very active in doing that as an organization. I'm very much a believer in that. And I think that the pendulum, when I first started practicing in the early 2000s, the pendulum was really on the right of the conservative side. I mean, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio were very, very conservative. Now, when you look at a map of the state, you've got blue cities with red rural, right? And that in and of itself has created a pendulum with that environment that we talked about of no caps, very active plaintiffs bar. And the only way to address that pendulum shift that has gone all the way in the plaintiff side is to attack it through the legislature. And we've done that in different components. The counter affidavits was one of those bills that we proffered several years ago that affected the practice and aided us. Now we're going through modifications of that. The most recent, Chapter 72, which is the bifurcation in trucking cases that separates reptile and separates trying the company into the second half and only dealing with negligence on behalf of the driver in the first half. There are multiple things that we've done to chip away at it. Every time we get a very good bill, it goes to the floor, it gets chewed up, but you get a little bit of it out, and we slowly make progress, because at some point that pendulum always shifts back, and the plaintiffs know, and the Werner case was critical in this, the plaintiffs bar knows that if you go too far on that side, it will fall apart. The middle is where things have got to kind of be. So that's a long point to come back to the question there, Nick, is that the way that we are addressing it, and the only way that we have found effective, is to deal with it in the legislature and to become very active on that.
Yeah, it's good. It's interesting because, I think Minnesota in some ways, as you described Texas now, I think Minnesota is becoming very similar to that. We do have some areas, I would say, in Duluth and Minneapolis, St. Paul, that are very blue counties, but then have a lot of red, I'd say, outside of those metropolitan areas. But given the rise in verdicts, it's been hard to advise clients, right, on what's the range of a potential verdict. And the reality is that just given the ones that we have, sometimes the answer is we don't know. In the last 6 to 12 months, we've seen 8-figure verdicts from historically some of the biggest and most conservative counties in the state. And Minnesota, very similar, it sounds like, to Texas. There have been ways groups, including the local defense bar, other organizations, have been trying to write legislation that will eventually help with that. There are other states surrounding Minnesota that have attempted through their legislature to do it. We just haven't got to that step. And we do have a very organized plaintiffs bar on the other side. And so it's good to hear the different ways, at least, that Texas is trying to address that. And it'll be curious to see. I doubt Minnesota will get that far, but it's always good to hear, because that's absolutely the right move I think we need to do. And we haven't had a case so far, like the Werner case that you were referencing earlier, where through the case law, we're able to attack it on a case-by-case basis. And so those are all interesting points.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Trey, that you've done is also not just at the state level and working with legislatures, but internally, I know you keep metrics on the lawyers you go up against, the cases, whether it's your firm's cases, other cases, and you're tracking what do they settle for, what's the initial demand, what cases are going to trial, and I think part of that is so you can advise your clients about, on the bad cases, yeah, what's the true value? And then also, which ones can we pick to try? And which ones can we pick to start telling our story of not everything's a runaway verdict, that, we are getting some either straight defense verdicts or favorable verdicts compared to demand. So I guess kind of what was the genesis of that, and what have you been able to accomplish with that?
So the genesis kind of goes back to my background, and honestly, I don't know if we've chatted about this personally offline about this, but so I prior to going into law, I had an undergrad degree in clinical psychology, and then I started doing a PhD in clinical psych, and I enjoyed the program. I was actually a therapist for about 2.5 years after I completed a certain number of hours, and but I had a professor who was in the program that I was working with in one of the hospitals because I was working in a lockdown unit at the time, and I sat down across from her and said, "Hey." She had every degree. She had an MD, JD, and PhD. And I said, if you could do any of your degrees over again, which one would you do? She said her JD. And without going into all the details of all that, that's what led me to go to law school, is that I ended up going to my program director and I said, look, rather than me finishing this dissertation, can I take what I've written, turn that into a master's thesis, get the master's degree, and then I'm going to take the LSAT and go to law school. And my professor very hesitantly agreed, but ended up getting everything checked off. And so that was in January. I ended up graduating in May with a master's degree, took the LSAT, did everything that I needed to do, and ended up getting into law school that following semester. I tell you that background because the metrics is how I wrote my dissertation. I used all these metrics to be able to compare because again, coming from clinical, it was very metric based. And so that's just been me. I'm very much evidence metric based in everything that I do, all the way to bringing up raising my daughters to personal relationships. It's a flaw. Some will say it's a strength. But how it's applied to the practice is that I recognized probably about 10 years ago is that to really evaluate cases, we need to know what juries are saying, because what was happening, I think, is that you had these multipliers. Well, let's see, it's 3 times meds, and that'll be a good number. And again, you go back and if you look and you compared what juries were providing during that time period, it was nothing compared to that. And where the delta was, the difference between what people were saying it was evaluated for and what juries were providing had to do with the non-economics. And so what I decided to do, and I can't recall how long we've been doing it, but we're watching through different Google reminders and contacts in the major cities, as well as in valleys and small areas that have a lot of transportation in them. And we've collected those jury verdict forms as much as we can. Obviously, not the ones that we're trying. We've started listservs, pseudo listservs within the Texas Association of Defense Counsel, where I've asked and inquired and told people, any jury verdict form that you get in this area, please send it to me. I've talked to all of my friends that are in the transportation space, specifically in Texas, and said, hey, I will share my data with you. If you'll just send me everything that you can get, I'll be the repository. That's how that started. So then you try to get some variables, again, going back to the clinical side and evaluation and all the hypothesis, you get the variables lined out. Okay, it was some very, without going into all the detail, what kind of injuries, what was the accident, low impact, high impact, just some very small variables. And then you get a metric that shows that in Harris County, because the next step to that is you take, okay, Harris County, this is what typically the economics were. How did that compare with the non-economics? Meaning that if it was $100,000 and they came back with $600,000 in non-economics, that's a 6 times multiplier, right? And that's what people used to do. So what we're taking that mentality and we're putting it through a couple more filters and coming up with a very sophisticated metric system of saying, okay, in Harris County, that multiplier, if you want to use that terms, and I don't use that term, but just as an example, it's this value. So $100,000 in a case that has these components is worth that amount. And so then I take that and we do a chart with a high and a low, and our side is the low, plaintiff side is the high. That non-economics is a row of that, and then our case evaluation. This is just Trey's style, and I think what clients have really appreciated is that midpoint typically indicates what our best case evaluation is. And then when I talk about it, and I'm training my team and everybody on it, when we talk about that value, that's when we put in our experience and our expertise. Okay, so the midpoint is this, but the pictures are horrific. The video is going to be terrible. Our client is bad. Their client's great. And all those little small things, you adjust that, and then you get that sophisticated metric based evaluation.
And are you for hire to come do this in other jurisdictions?
Well, I'll tell you, man. Look. There are days when there's about 10 fires going on the number of files that I'm looking at, and going, you know what? I'm just going to start a company. I'm just going to box this, and we're just going to do this across the country. Because dealing with clients that don't want to respond, or attorneys that have all kind of whatever the issues are, I've definitely thought about that. But yeah, joking aside, I enjoy that. And honestly, I'll tell you the next level of this, guys, and we can go on to another topic, is that I do a best practices in-house ELE, where I have all of my lawyers from all the different offices come in for my team, and we're doing it in December. And we take that metric and we see, okay, this is the high and the low, and this was the midpoint. And I have an assistant that is tracking this. So for all the cases that were settled, tried this year, I can go back and look and see that for Knight Swift, or for Prime, or for Canal, or for National Interstate, all of their cases, we evaluated it between these two, and we settled or tried the case, and it settled, or the verdict came back and it was within that realm. And so in 2024, our accuracy was 91.7, meaning our evaluations of when they settled were within that range and within that small delta. There were a couple of outliers, and the outliers were both on both sides. So you had a couple that settled higher, and there were some reasons for that. And then there were some ones that settled for lower, and obviously that's always a win. What we try to eliminate based upon this is surprises, right? We don't want to get to, we've worked this case up for 2.5 years, and then we've evaluated 100,000. All of a sudden now we're mediating it a month before trial, and now we're evaluating it at 95, 950,000 or something like that. That's what that is meant to eliminate. And so point being is that one of the next steps that we're doing in this evolution with our cases is I'm going to be sending out kind of a thank you for 2025 to each of my clients that says, here's the number of cases that we settled for you this year. Here's the range. And we were we were 90 something % accurate on that, and we look forward to improving. That's just another marketing aspect that we're going to be utilizing, just to kind of continue to build that mentality of what we're doing is not just sitting in an office and putting a finger in there and think, okay, this one's worth 500,000.
Right.
It's true though. I mean, what you guys are doing, by the way, is fantastic, and I would say it's not the norm in a good way. And what I always struggle with, at least in my practice, is that question, well, what's the value of the case? Well, there's just so many different data points within there to discuss. What we've also seen too, and that we've been shocked by, Mark Solheim and myself had 3 cases in the last 6 months that we took to mock juries. And we had evaluated it beforehand, then we took it to the mock jury, and on all different times, we got widely different responses. And so it's becoming more and more difficult, depending, on the facts of the case and the forum that you're in, right? But to give those evaluations in a right way. And I think the way that you guys are doing it and being able to use it also as a marketing technique, it's fantastic. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and again, it takes time. And I'll tell you the thing that I didn't realize because I kind of had envisioned this as it's just kind of who I am. It takes staff. And when you're dealing with the number of cases we're dealing with, that's the critical thing. It's hard to do what we're doing if I don't have a dedicated staff member doing these things, right? Because I can't do it all on that. And training every lawyer to do it is another thing. With the lawyers, the first years, the second years that come in and start working with our team, they get a breadth of experience. And I have one legal assistant, one paralegal that is their focus. They record everything, they track everything, do all those things. And then when we write the report, they're assisting us with that evaluation because they're plugging in the information that is being generated. So it's being honed. Like I said, it's an evolution. It's still not perfect, but we're taking steps to try to make it better.
Yeah. Well, Trey, you've been really generous with your time today, with your advice, with everything you've talked about. Again, I appreciate everything you do, not only for U.S. law, but for the transportation industry. And for anybody listening that's new to U.S. law, that wants to get more involved, If you are at a conference, at an exchange, you're at one of these industry events where US Law is putting something on, or even if they're not and Trey happens to be there, find him, introduce yourself. He is very generous with his time. Is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and certainly will go out of his way to help you. So do not make yourself a stranger to Trey, and he'll be a good friend to you. So Trey, thanks for all you do, and thanks for your time today.
I appreciate you guys, man. Thank you for taking this time, and always enjoy it, man. Look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Good to see you, Trey.
Thank you for listening to US Law Live. Stay tuned for more great conversations on US Law Live. To learn more about US Law Network, visit uslaw.org. Thank you.